I really enjoyed Fuse. David, I also loved Relay last year. I thought it was so inventive. And your work is often genre bending. And I love that you could have done a whole movie on just the bomb situation or a heist. And instead, we get this really unique blend. What about this project and this mix of genres really appealed to you?
Well, it was an original idea of mine, and what it was just basically a simple idea of trying. I love tension in movies, and seeing what would happen if you mashed up two high tension genres and stuck them together, and so that was the kind of concept. uh, I mean, it doesn't happen so often in the United States. In fact, it doesn't happen really at all in the United States. But in London and other parts of Britain and other parts of Europe, people discover bombs on building sites almost every 6 months, and so this sort of protocol that the police have, that the Gugu's character went through, and that the army guys go through, is something that's well practiced, well rehearsed. People have, it's probably not her first rodeo in this scenario. So there's something really interesting about that for me, that trying to take that real situation and then inserting this other narrative in there, and playing this game of almost pure cinema, kind of like high tension, and kinetic kind of movement, and just playing that very very sort of short and sharp kind of version of the film, and that was good fun, and part of the kind of concept of it.
Yeah, I love that combination. And Giga, your role takes place in a command center, and I feel like those types of roles are unexpectedly difficult because you're spending so much time doing phone calls and doing exposition. And that can be tricky and make viewers tune out. But you managed to thread that needle. So, how did you approach this role?
Oh, thank you. Well, I was really fortunate to be able to do some research. We had an amazing, police consultant on the film, and to be able to visit some of these real life, police control command centers and speak with high ranking female police officers in and around London. And that really helped sort of ground it for me. And I think, David's sort of process of, focusing on authenticity and really keeping it grounded and gritty, and the realism of that really was really helpful. And I think in some ways, when you are in these control rooms, you are sort of seemingly at a distance from the action. But I think for me it was really important just to hang on to her sense of integrity, but also bringing almost like the audience's eyes on the weight of the stakes, and the humanity and compassion that she still has to have, even though she's got a really important job to do, holding on to really what the worst possible consequences could be, and just grounding that in the human element.
But it's
Yeah,
interesting because
I think that
there
comes
is a
through.
bit of there's a bit of exposition that has to come in there, and I think the guys, and Gugu's relationship with the sergeant played by Honor Swinton Byrne, where there's and they made it so organic that it doesn't feel like exposition. Do you know what I mean? That's a challenge, and it just came alive in a really great way. So you're being fed information, but it doesn't feel like you're being fed information. That's the aspiration anyway.
Yeah, I feel like that exactly. And David, my last question, this year's Hell or High Water's 10th anniversary. I know a few years back there was a talk of a TV show in the works at Fox. Do we know if that's still alive?
I haven't had a conversation about that for quite some time, so I don't know whether it's dormant, or I don't know what the situation is on that one, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You know, I'm very fond of that film, and the experience I had of making it, and I maybe have mixed feelings about messing with the legacy of that in some way, but it's mixed feelings.